because I find it completely fascinating, emotional locations in the body and how they lock up.
Not everybody's trauma is obvious.
You have to make the decision to seek more answers beyond just the physical body.
We continue to run on that pattern forever and ever and ever until we kind of go Control Alt Delete.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Root to Rise. My name is Dr. Emily Splichal, your host, and I am very excited for today's show. Not only do we have an extremely intelligent woman as our guest, but she is a very dear friend of mine, and we are going to continue to explore the power of our emotions and how it affects our physical body. Now, before we bring her on, I'm going to share a brief intro for our guest. Skye's journey into the health and wellness industry began over 30 years ago, driven by her personal experience with chronic pain. As someone who faced lifelong physical challenges, including multiple concussions and injuries as a Division I soccer goalkeeper, she has developed a deep passion for helping others live pain-free and healthy lives. Her early career included work as a personal trainer, stretch therapist, Pilates instructor, but in 2013, she discovered what she calls the missing link, and this is NeuroKinetic Therapy, NKT. This discovery revolutionized both her personal healing and her professional approach to her clients' care. In 2014, Skye founded the Functional Body Institute, and as a Level 3 NKT practitioner, she began integrating NKT as her primary tool for addressing pain, dysfunction, and compensation patterns in every client session. In 2017, she became an NKT instructor, and today she teaches in 4 territories across the United States. Known for her approachable teaching style, Skye is now a sought-after presenter and continuing educator instructor. She is recognized for her ability to simplify complex materials, telling engaging stories, which I can vouch for that, and creating an inclusive, dynamic learning environment, making her an ideal mentor for both new and experienced practitioners. Currently, Skye is developing healing retreats designed to help participants explore and rewire their emotional, mental, and physical patterns that contribute to chronic pain. These immersive experiences combine principles from survival patterning, attachment theory, and human design, guiding individuals toward lasting transformation through neuroplasticity and nervous system repatterning. Sign me up for all of that. Welcome, Skye. It is such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I absolutely love your work. And as someone who has received your methods, NKT and Nervy and other methods that you practice, I know that you have a very, very unique eye for compensation patterns, for chronic pain. And a lot of it, I feel, is just intuitive through touch and your year's experience. So I would love to kick this off by having you just share a little bit about how you uniquely look at emotion and the physical body and how the body possibly holds on to pain.
Well, sometimes life experience is our best teacher, and
Absolutely.
So my own personal experience kind of led me into the emotional component of things. After a lot of the physical work and getting all the manual therapy didn't clean up certain areas, and working on thousands of people and seeing how why do these patterns keep repeating when we're doing all the right things and they're getting all the right techniques done? They're getting the massage, they're getting the physical therapy and the chiropractic care and whatever it is they need. And maybe they're even doing the trauma work, but why are some things not shifting or seem to be stuck?
What is it about our emotions that they get stuck in the body? That they get trapped in possibly the low back or a hip or our connective tissue?
Well, I think it's different for each individual. I think, everybody has their own quote unquote weak spots in their body based on their injury history And, certain areas of the body are going to hold certain traumas or certain emotions more than others.
Okay.
Like the jaw tends to be more our anger and our frustration and our bitterness versus our diaphragm tends to hold more the sadness and the grief or the anxiety. So, and then we have injuries in certain areas that maybe that bleeds over into, if that kind of makes sense.
So you are saying certain traumas or belief patterns can find or they latch on to different tissue or parts of the body.
Our superficial fascia layers kind of like holds on to different emotions and tension in our body. And based on being in sympathetic fight or flight, we can really kind of lock down certain areas.
So I used to joke when I lived in New York City that New Yorkers put all their tension, maybe trauma, tension in their pelvic floor, and they were all locked in their pelvic floor. I don't know if there's any validity to that, but it sounds like you must see patterns of individuals locking into the traps or maybe into the pelvic floor. I would actually see as a podiatrist a lot in the feet and in the calves. Can you share just a few of those? Because I find it completely fascinating of emotional locations in the body and how they lock up.
Well, again, I think it's history with people. And people could be disconnected to their feet because they don't have roots, so to speak. They're not very rooted. Maybe their home life is very walking on eggshells. Or maybe it's also they've had a surgery like a C-section, like myself, and they get disconnected from everything down below on that scar because it's kind of cut through nerve pathways. So we have the physical disconnect, but then we have the emotion of this trauma from having to have an emergency C-section that's now tied into it. So this is how one woman can have a planned C-section and not really have trauma because they planned it all out versus, you try to have a natural childbirth and then you get rushed into the emergency room for an emergency C-section because you or the baby are at risk.
Yeah. So you're saying that scar would hold the emotion of the emergency C-section.
100%. So they're going to have the fear and the anxiety and maybe grief or sadness held in that versus, hey, I need to have a C-section because of whatever physical reason. So we're going to plan it, a week around my due date on Tuesday at 10 a.m. And you plan that 2 to 3 months out, and you're mentally prepared for that. And you have your support system set up for that. Yep. It's kind of like when multiple people are in the same car wreck and one person is traumatized and the other ones aren't. Okay. And it's like, what's the difference? And it's, how regulated was their nervous system going into this wreck? Did they see it coming like, or were they just singing or having a conversation and didn't even know they got hit? And then what is their support system after the wreck? Because all that is going to matter of whether we hold some kind of emotional trauma in that whiplash or that back pain or whatever injury we sustained in that car wreck.
So is that the missing link that you find in chronic pain and body work, muscle, joint stiffness, et cetera, is actually the emotional component to it?
Yeah, it's like, NKT is wonderful in finding these very physical patterns for people. But if there is this limbic override of an emotional component, based on whatever the event or the experience, we have to address that. And so we can refer clients out, for EMDR therapy and sound therapy and different type of emotional release techniques that can assist them with that.
Okay. Is that how you approach your clients now? Is that you try to look, let's say, multidisciplinary in the kind of body healing side of it, where if you feel that they're not responding to your traditional approach of NKT, just NKT on its own, plus their homework, do you then start to explore deeper, or from day one, do you go in factoring in emotion with your clients?
Well, it depends on what they're coming in for.
Okay.
Usually, I like to go straight in for let's clean up these very physical patterns that are caused by these injuries or surgeries or repetitive movements that you have within your lifestyle or your sport that you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
But after 2 or 3 sessions, if we're not getting really, the results we're really looking for, then we have to like look into what emotion could be tied into this, or what trauma didn't get to complete a cycle.
Interesting. And then it is stuck in the middle of its cycle in the tissue, in the body.
Yes, in the fascia.
In the fascia. Interesting.
The fascia is kind of that envelope that likes to, you know.
Hold things.
Yes.
Yes.
And it also likes to get stuck and, need people to get in there, manually release it. But if you can manually release it and also try to think through the trauma or the experience or the event while they're doing that work, that can help your nervous system process it and not see it as the threat that it was.
Got it.
Because it's really just about changing that perceived threat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you address the trauma and the emotion, let's say through EMDR, trauma healing, and you're not doing NKT and body work, let's say, will it just release itself from the fascia on its own as you're releasing the trauma? Or do you also have to combine that trauma work with body work?
I think it depends on the client. Ultimately, the body is going to create compensation patterns around perceived threat. If there's not strength and stability around a joint, we're going to need to create that strength and stability, through some form of strength training, exercising, right? And then if there's stuck tissue, obviously we're going to need some manual work to unstick the tissue. And then if there's structure damage where, people need to actually have structure issues cleaned up, we need to address all those things. But a lot of times there's an emotion overriding all that.
Got it, which you will not be able to fully release the little connective tissue without addressing the emotion first.
Most people don't address that or even aware of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, there are people who can have the right therapist. And yes, they can address and release those emotions and repattern their nervous system. And yes, they don't necessarily need physical work.
Got it. Okay.
But, the more you tie the both together, because a lot of times when people are stuck in that freeze phase, they need to do the movement drills and the mobility, the shake it out, sing it out, dance it out.
Yeah. The mobilize of the,
right.
the emotion.
And be aware of, I have awareness that right now I've just been triggered and I'm jaw clenching and I have my neck pain. Maybe my neck pain or my back pain is my body's physical system or signal of, hey, you've just been triggered and you're back into that emotional anger or fear that's driving these symptoms. And I can be aware of that and stop and go, okay, let me regulate.
Yep.
Let me do whatever it is that works best for my nervous system based on, am I stuck in more fight or flight, right?
Yes, I like how you put it in the context of connective tissue, fascia. I have a chronic hip injury that we've addressed before. You've described it that way because I've seen it in my practice for neurological presentations, for like dystonias or neuritises, complex regional pain syndrome. So more nervous system driven, which makes sense as far as nervous system dysregulation. You're in a fight or flight, that's going to flare up all the peripheral nerves. But here, thinking fascia and the muscles, which I guess are controlled by the nervous system, so that makes sense as well. But it's really, really powerful and eye-opening, and it gives the listeners the thought, I'm really about empowering. And if you're not getting the results that you're expecting and the practitioner that you're seeing doesn't understand the depth of what you're speaking of, that you have to make the decision to seek more, to seek for more answers beyond just the physical body. Yeah, very interesting. I want to go back to the scars because that is something that I don't know if a lot of listeners are aware of that. And I've had my scars worked on, and it might not be an area that people are thinking is contributing to some of their compensation or muscle inhibition. Can you just share a little bit more about how you look at scars and how you release scars specifically?
Well, I mean, scars affect the nervous system again in many ways. Some are very superficial, some are not. Some scars are planned, some are not. But the nervous system doesn't like getting cut no matter what. And, and when you're cutting through the fascia and the nerve, you're literally cutting through nerves. And your body is creating a compensation pattern around that to change your movement to protect you. And what most people aren't told is, hey, 8 or 12 weeks after that surgery, or after you get your stitches out for whatever reason you had stitches in the first place, is we need to rewire the compensation pattern that your body created around that threat.
Wait, sorry. You're saying at the time that the sutures are removed is when you would want to do the repatterning?
Not at the time they were removed. No, about 8 or 12 weeks afterwards.
Ah, okay.
Usually about 8 or 12 weeks post-surgery is when we would want it. Because, right after surgery, I had my C-section, I needed my nervous system to send all the signal to the scar, right? To have it anchor down and close off and protect me from opening up, right? And keeping all my organs in. And, your first few movements of getting up after a surgery like that is your nervous system going, we can't feel certain things and we don't have connectivity to this anymore, but we've got to protect the human by keeping her moving. So, we're going to over signal this area and pull from other areas and rewire this pattern. But what we don't realize is we continue to run on that pattern forever and ever and ever until we kind of go Control Alt Delete. So that's where the NeuroKinetic Therapy comes in and teaches our body to stop over signaling the scar and activate or upregulate the muscles that were shut down because of it.
Okay.
And, is there an emotional component as well? A lot of times if it's an emergency situation or like the mother or the baby, has some kind of major issue or trauma during the surgery, yes, then we're going to have to deal with the emotional component with that scar as well.
Got it. So I feel like that is not discussed by orthopedists or obstetricians or I never learned that as a surgeon.
No offense to your New Yorkers, but I think there's a lot of pelvic floors that are super tight and disconnected just from having babies alone. And women are taught, how to reconnect after pregnancy, of how like your diaphragm tends to overwork, or, we're too much pulling in our feet and toe gripping, to try to create that stability we've lost in our intrinsic core after carrying and delivering a baby.
Yeah. No, it's clearly missed in traditional Western medicine is this, not even thinking about the emotional side, but just the neuromuscular repatterning that you're speaking about. And if I can share firsthand my experience after having athletic pubalgia or sports hernia, which is a tear of the rectus abdominis fascia, which created, so it was a break in connective tissue integrity, which led to a adductor longus spasm, and the whole leg was shut down. My deep hip would shut off, pelvic floor would shut off, as I'm sure you're familiar with the pattern. But it was really interesting that I had the surgery, they reapproximated the tear, so sutures, scar, And then 6, 8 weeks later, cleared, you're good to go, starting to do the rehab. I couldn't get the adductor out of the spasm that was there prior to surgery as well. It was really interesting that there was no resetting of that actual neuromuscular pattern. And then I wish I had known you back then. I did it in a very long, convoluted way, but eventually I got towards the pattern. So can you share with the listeners just a little bit deeper about what NKT is? So if they're listening, they can seek out if this is something that they want to explore in their own healing journey.
Well, in your situation, that's where I would, after enough rest time and recovery from your surgery, I would have went in and checked those specific muscles and see, who has signal, who doesn't have signal, and then where is that signal being rerouted. And in your case, the scar shutting down the rectus abdominis and the adductor area and psoas and other muscles that cross over that area that would be affected by that scar. And then teach your nervous system how to rewire the pattern by releasing the scar and activating those muscles with some light isometric movement.
So you do this through muscle testing, correct?
Yes.
And it's something that, like, I wouldn't be able to figure out this pattern in myself, right? You would have to go to a therapist who understands.
Yeah, it's really hard to
patterns.
muscle test your own adductors. I haven't figured it out yet. So you do need someone to do the manual muscle testing to the different movement patterns to see, is it hip flexion? Is it hip extension? Is it hip adduction? Do you have access to your obliques as well as your rectus abdominis and transverse abdominis? Those types of things. But there's therapists all over the world. So
through NKT.
Through NKT,
okay.
Yeah.
And what would be the website that someone could find a specialist or therapist?
NeuroKineticTherapy.com.
Okay, NeuroKineticTherapy.com to find someone. Now, is this similar or completely different than muscle activation technique or MAT?
I'm not really sure what MAT is, so I can't answer that question.
Okay.
What I can say is what NKT is, and it's basically taking manual muscle testing or applied kinesiology with very specific protocols to figure out, okay, this is the fascial line that's shut down. Like maybe it's your front line or your back line or your pelvic floor, your intrinsic core. And then we're trying to figure out, based on your history, where's your brain over signaling? And then we're teaching you how to down-regulate that area and get signal back to the front line or the back line or wherever your pain complaints are.
Got it. Okay. So I know homework is a big part of your practice, and probably NKT as well, where there is a turning off of a muscle, and you may use the appropriate words if I'm not using the right ones, but you're down-regulating one muscle and then up-regulating another so that we get into a properly coordinated pattern. Why is homework so important to what you're teaching and how you get a client to successfully kind of move past that pattern?
Well, I mean, ultimately, we get into the pattern because of bad repetitions, because we did too many repetitions of something and then it became dysfunctional. Or, we had this injury or surgery. So it takes around 300 to 700 repetitions to create the pattern in the brain to where it's just a habit.
Okay.
So I tell my clients, we have to get enough of the good reps in.
Yes, through doing that. So is that once a day is sufficient, or you have to do multiple times a day to essentially do your good reps and program the nervous system?
Well, therein lies where emotional components might come into play. Because, if you have stress and anger, I tell my CPAs, no offense to CPAs and people who do taxes, but there's a certain season between January and April where their back pain or neck pain or wherever their chronic area is in their body is going to be, light up a little more during that time frame because they're going to be jaw clenching and stressing over crunching numbers.
Okay.
Right? So when we have a physical pattern that's more emotionally driven due to our stress, our angers, our fears, our environment, that's when I'm like, okay, we might want to do your homework a little more frequently during that time period. Or if this is your golf pattern and you're going to go play a golf tournament, then you might want to do a little more resets during breaks.
Yep.
As you rev up function.
Yep. No, that totally makes sense. Have you heard of a red light reflex and a green light reflex as far as posturing?
I have not.
So a green light reflex and posture is, think of like a hypervigilant person, like you're in the wild looking over the grass. So your neck is kind of coming forward. You're a little bit more lordotic. The chest is up. So you're thinking posturally that pattern would be someone in a hypervigilant state, where a red light reflex would be kind of the shutdown, where they're rounded forward, they're tucking their rib cage down and shoulders are forward, which is then kind of this depressive and it's dissociated. Just to go back to the emotion, and if you hadn't seen those, you see them without actually calling it that. But do you see someone comes in, let's say they're type A, anxious, go, go, go. Say they're from New York. And you can see them. Is your mind already saying, there's some some key areas where you know that there are patterns that lie in personalities or states like this? Do you see that in your work?
Oh, 100%. So you can tell, like, just by how someone, can they even lay still and relax on the table?
Right.
Right. When I'm trying to test a certain muscle, are they really fascially guarded and don't even want to give up control? Are they able to relax and let me just move them through certain positions? When I touch their body or when other people get worked on, you can see how, because when I teach classes, I can see how the power of touch, even just a light touch, if there's like a trapped emotion in an area, a person's going to have more of like an electric response.
Okay.
Being touched in that area than the normal, like, oh, that's a good spot, dig deeper. It's more about, kind of.
Is there a way for the listeners to start to self-explore their own connection between emotions and their body and possibly pain that they're carrying or compensation that they're carrying, whether it's through different practices, seeing a practitioner, seeing a body worker, anything to start to pique the curiosity to dive into this even more?
Well, awareness is key. So ultimately, if you can think, every time my neck hurts or my hip hurts, what just happened a few minutes before then, right? Or what is my stress levels right now? Or maybe even dive a little deeper and maybe try to think of what is the primary emotion I feel most days? And what is my inner critic saying to me every day? Because a lot of that can drive the feeling that gets us into that triggered sympathetic, your green light or red light in my world is, are you in that fight or flight sympathetic response, or which is green in my world? And then are you more dorsal, red, not moving, freeze, fawn response, and how can we regulate or co-regulate to reset You got to have that awareness first that you've even been triggered and that your anger and your stress is making you jaw clench to create the neck pain.
Mm-hmm. So it's the awareness of your baseline emotional state, and then to correlate that to when you feel physical things in your body. Is that kind of how you're saying?
Journaling is the best way to see your patterns. You know, obviously hiring someone to help you see those patterns.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard for us to see our own patterns and being on our own hamster wheels.
Right.
You know, our close family members are pretty good about calling us out on our patterns. You may or may not want to hear it from your sister or your brother, you know, or your significant other or your mother, but they can see your patterns a lot of the times, and that's where your health professionals can also come in and help you see your patterns. But just simple daily journaling of these are the feelings I feel every day to start seeing what are my patterns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So do you have any favorite, like your personal favorite for healing, whether it's EMDR, psychedelics, sound baths, breath work, just you personally in your own journey or for your clients that you recommend in exploring as far as that emotional healing?
Well, for me personally, as someone who tends to go in freeze mode, I do a lot of movement.
Okay.
I like to put my bare feet on the ground, use my neuro ball that you gave me, really reconnect my feet to my pelvis because my C-section literally like pulled the plug on that. And so many women come back to me with the same thing that I've experienced of like, I felt like I was walking up the stairs, but my legs were 3 steps behind me. I was totally disconnected from my legs and my feet. So, you know, daily things for me is reconnecting my feet to the rest of my body through grounding exercises and being outside in nature. I try to like kill multiple birds with one stone by, you know, the physical work, the mental work, the emotional work. So I'm smelling things that drive my nervous system into the right emotional state. I have the visual of the mountains and the sunrise when my feet are in the grass, but I also like to walk over different surfaces just to light up the bottom of my feet and really put myself in joy and peace to reset that as my pattern instead of my old, you know, like panic or fear or anger that would drive my neck pain and my back pain.
Mm-hmm. So do you believe in then like a daily practice or start your day with this or end your day? How do you guide your clients into that?
Well, again, it's about getting in the good reps. So just like homework with the physical repatterning of going through enough reps to get the body to do the pattern the way it's supposed to be, you would want to rewire your nervous system to have the frequency of the emotion that you want to feel primarily instead of the old anger or fear, resentment, whatever it might be. So yes, daily journaling for 10 minutes or going for a walk in nature or, you know, doing some kind of routine that works for you and your body that can tap into as many of your senses as possible to get the nervous system, right? Because you really want to tap into as many of the senses as possible while you're doing this. And yes, the more repetitions, if you could just spend 10 minutes every day, wiring your nervous system to feel the joy or the peace and safety instead of what it might be wired at, and not even knowing that that old concussion, because not everybody's trauma is obvious, you know? So my first concussion at 8 years old, falling out of a tree, my chronic pain started years later, but we didn't know why. And it wasn't an obvious thing.
Yeah, that's a powerful takeaway.
You get shot with a gun or in some kind of major accident or, you know, So
do you believe that we all have trauma?
I think we all have some kind of trauma. I think more people have, I think it's like degrees of it or, a scale. Because again, it depends on what was your home life in those first early years, and did you have safety and security from your primary caregiver?
Yep.
At that, then that's going to make you a lot more resilient when things do happen.
Got it. So I recently found out about your retreats, and I felt a little left out that I didn't know before, but I have been so curious and was thinking to explore retreats where it's like one-stop shop trauma healing. That's how I thought of it. So can you share a little bit about your retreat specifically and the power or the importance of a retreat just in general, so if the listeners are curious about that level of healing as well?
Well, I mean, for a lot of people, they don't realize we're not meant to heal alone. And so, like, the biggest part of the retreat is coming together and kind of creating your own tribe for healing and creating your own healing vocabulary, because a lot of people don't have their own healing vocabulary to say, oh, wow, my body always heals itself so quickly, versus why do I always get sick? Why am I always the one that catches the latest whatever going around? And see that drive certain patterns. So, creating that tribe and then being able to share your story, whatever that is in your world, and being able to connect with other people who have been through similar situations and realizing you're not alone, being able to be vulnerable, yet have safe space held for you.
Yep.
We'll be doing a lot of sound healing and body work of all types to help people reconnect their emotional and their physical bodies. And basically, it's really just a deep dive of figuring out and bringing awareness of what are my emotional patterns, what are my physical patterns, and how can I create the shift and the change to rewire those patterns while being supported by women in a loving environment.
Yeah. Do you focus primarily on women and women going through trauma?
Yes.
Okay. Very interesting.
Not that I'm against men. I will do male retreats, but initially it's women only.
And then that leaving a retreat is probably just as important as the retreat itself, as far as how you reinforce that, your daily practices, everything else that you spoke about.
Oh, 100%. So we plan on sending you home with tools to integrate back in your real world after unplugging for several days. And then we do plan on doing group follow-ups in 30, 60, and 90 days to have that hand-holding and accountability that most people need. And again, it's the support of the tribe.
Yeah, it must be
support system.
Yeah, to feel like you're not alone, because I feel like sometimes people can feel like I'm the only one experiencing this depth or this type of trauma or feeling this way. So there's something powerful with that. I love that. That,
and a lot of people literally don't have support. They don't have family. They don't have the friends where they're at because they've been moved across the country and isolated in certain situations, or people have died, or whatever their situation is. Not everybody has that support tribe setup that they need to kind of be what I call that sandbar to call when, I'm in a tizzy and I can't regulate myself and my menopause hormones might have got the best of me. Like I need to phone a friend right now before I do something I might regret, right?
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, this has been very, very eye-opening. I love it. I hope the listeners enjoyed everything. Are there any questions that you wanted me to ask you or last thoughts that you wanted to share with the listeners?
I think last thoughts maybe is just, awareness that, like, hey, some of your chronic pain that's been there for a while might just be emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you might have gone to therapy and done all types of things, be it talk therapy and those types of modalities, or the manual therapies as well. But maybe trying to consider tying the two together
Mm-hmm.
and really just taking some time out of each day to check in with yourself and seeing what is this emotion I'm feeling on this consistent, regular basis?
Mm-hmm.
And does it vibrate at love or joy or peace, or is it more of something a little negative like anger or frustration, bitterness, resentment? And really tying into that part of my hip pain or my back pain or my neck pain that I'm chronically feeling. Because I really think not enough people are tying those things together,
No.
and they're not aware that their breath holding and jaw clenching because of the anger and frustration is then, your neck pain is just the symptom that something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, sometimes it is very physical, structure related issues, 100%. But then there's all the times it's not. And I went and got
Yeah.
the x ray and the MRI and nothing shows up. That's where we have to look at, okay, what might be the mental or emotional pattern that's driving that pain?
Yeah.
And just awareness and maybe talking to a close friend that you can trust to give you feedback of
Mm-hmm.
how I might be self-talking to create some of that pain. And my own self-critic, do you hear me criticize myself,
Yeah.
or do you hear me praise myself as my
Mm-hmm.
friend or, sibling or colleague, whatever?
Yeah.
That would be my final thoughts. It's just bringing awareness and journaling and having the right friend or two to ask the right questions to help you
Mm-hmm.
sort it if you can't find a professional in your area that lines up with you.
Yeah, no, such a powerful message. I know you've taught me a lot about my own body and to ask those questions, to be curious. I do have my daily ritual of my senses that I'm stimulating and anchoring and building those good repetitions. So absolutely appreciate your work, Skye. Where can the listeners learn more about your work, NeuroKinetic Therapy, but also that emotional side that you tie in very uniquely?
Well, for now, I'm kind of keeping things on the down low while I'm working on behind the scenes stuff, if you could appreciate it. So they can find out NeuroKinetic Therapy information of upcoming classes if they're in the health and fitness industry and want to take this as a continuing education. For someone like yourself who might want to implement it into your practice, or if they're looking for a practitioner to actually receive the work, the neurokinetictherapy.com has a directory that's
Okay.
United States or international, depending on where they live. Or you can reach out to me personally if you want more of the emotional work, because I do know people in different areas that can assist you, or I can do virtual sessions as well. So they can reach out to me via my email.
Okay, wonderful, good. And we will share that all in the show notes. Thank you so much, Skye. It was such a
You're
pleasure, and I
welcome.
learned so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here today.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Definitely check out Skye's work and ask those questions. Is possibly some of your musculoskeletal pain or chronic pain, maybe not just the physical, but a little bit emotional? Thank you so much, and I'll see you on another episode.